All right, it's about 7:02. So if the team could give me a thumbs up if we are all ready to go. Perfect. All right, I am just going to minimize this. All right, so hi everyone. Welcome to the Maquoketa River Watershed Management Plan's public input meeting. On behalf of the planning team, I would just like to thank you all for being here tonight. Your feedback is very important to us, and by participating in this meeting, you are helping us with one of the most important parts of our management plan. So for today's agenda, we will be starting with a presentation briefly covering, what a watershed is and what we have done so far in developing a management plan. At about 7:20, we'll be presenting our goals and objectives, and there will be some poll questions popping up on your screen, so make sure you're paying attention. After that, we will split up into breakout groups for a quick group activity, but don't worry, you don't have to talk if you don't want to, and you don't have to turn your cameras on. And once that is finished, we will come back as a group for just some final words. One important note is we will be keeping an eye on the chat, so if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to ask them there, and we'll do our best to answer them. We will also be available for questions after all of our activities if you'd like to stay on. So the Maquoketa River Watershed Plan overview, it is prepared for the Maquoketa River Watershed Management Authority, and you can see our some of our project partners and the members of the WMA, the MRWMA. This is funded through the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities in the city of Manchester. And it is managed in part by the University of Iowa and the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities. So here before we go any further, first, what is a watershed? A watershed is the area of land that drains into a lake or stream. Watersheds can be small, like the area that drains into the creek behind your house, or watersheds can be large. Think of all the land, streams, and rivers that drain into the Mississippi River. The Maquoketa River watershed covers over 1 million acres. The diagram here shows the water cycle. Water traveling over the surface or through groundwater may pick up contaminants like sediment, chemicals, waste, and deposit them in a body of water. So this is, what we're, sorry, lost my spot. Making changes on the land keeps pollutants from getting into our water systems. This map shows location of the Maquoketa River watershed and which counties it touches. The numbers on the map tell us how much of the watershed is located in that county. So Jackson and Delaware counties contain just under half of the entire watershed. In the upper corner, you can see the location of the watershed within the state. The Maquoketa River Watershed Plan, its goal is to create a regional community-driven plan with the goal to identify, prioritize, and address water-related issues such as water quality, flood mitigation, and soil preservation. So far there have been 2 phases to this. Phase 1, data gathering. We've been gathering information since August and really just reading all of the watershed plans in the state, seeing what we can incorporate here in the Maquoketa River watershed. From there, we developed a strategy and a long-term vision for the sustainable management of the Maquoketa River watershed. And phase 2 is to develop a water management action plan. And that is where you all help us. So this all focuses on water quality, flooding, the watershed community, and recreation. So the watershed study phase 1, data gathering. So we have done several different methods of data gathering, and some of the results have come from a survey, which I believe have reached some of you, and I'm sure you know some people who probably filled that out. Some focus groups, background data, and online research. So for the survey, we had about, I want to say the final number was about 400 people filling it out, and it, talked about recreation and flooding, what the concerns and priorities are for the respondents. The focus groups, we had 5 different focus groups. One focused on public leaders in urban areas. The second focused on recreation. The third, fourth, and fifth all focused on agriculture, but splitting agricultural groups up into sub-watersheds within the Maquoketa River watershed. And for online research, the Maquoketa River Watershed Management Authority has a website. We'll link it at the end of the presentation, and we encourage you all to check it out. There's a lot of great information. And we've also been reaching out to people through Facebook. So we also encourage you, if you have a Facebook, to follow. So phase 2, the development of a management plan. First, we figured out, background, existing conditions, and now we are going to be presenting the goals and objectives to you all, and that's where you're going to be able to help us. We also, had to go back and find additional data and collection, and we've done a lot of different analysis, and we've also collected different watershed tools and management approaches. So for this part, there are 5 goals, and each member of the planning team will cover one. With that, we also have several objectives. The objectives we will be asking you to pay close attention to, because we will be asking where your priority lies within those objectives. So here we go, on to goal 1.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Ellie Mullins, one of the planning team members. So this first goal is all about water quality. Improving water quality is one of the WMA's biggest tasks as an organization. As well, water quality was found to be a big concern for the respondents to our survey and many of our focus groups. So in our focus groups, lots of the participants noted the changes in cloudiness and dirt in the river after storms. And then with our survey respondents, while opinions differed quite a bit on the actual quality of the water in the river, they all agreed that well, not all, but most agreed that it is important to protect water quality. So around 60% were concerned about agricultural water pollution, as well as urban and industrial water pollution. In addition, 47% were concerned about the effect of water quality on fisheries and the combined effect of water quality and flooding on recreation and tourism. Lastly, around 43% agreed that they would be willing to pay more to improve water quality and reduce flooding. So those results are from that stakeholder survey that Jess was describing, that had about 430 respondents when we went to analyze it. So our survey and focus groups both informed our team about the efforts currently taking place to improve water quality. We used these to prioritize the types of strategies we included, looking at widespread activities throughout the watershed, like no-till, soil testing, and like household chemical disposal, to activities that respondents wanted to learn a bit more about, like cover crops and wetlands or native landscaping. So to move on to the objectives that we put together to kind of take us to reaching this goal, objective 1 is all about using less and making the most out of fertilizer on agricultural fields, and kind of working with the agricultural community to achieve this. The plan focuses on soil testing and application methods as strategies, along with many more, and employs educational and financial resources as recommendations to achieve this. Objective 2 focuses on slowing water down and letting it soak through the soil to reduce the amount of runoff that can take soil and other pollutants into the water. The plan focuses on no-till and cover crops and filter strips, and lots of other strategies. It's kind of the ways to do that. And then again, employs those educational and financial resources as recommendations to get those going. Objective 3 focuses on doing a similar thing, but in a more urban setting. For this one recommendation we made was to provide incentives for and focus on stormwater management strategies and to increase recreational spaces along the river. So the WMA for the past few years has been collecting water quality data, and objective 4 is to continue that practice to kind of know where we are at with these strategies. 1 second, I've got to let somebody into the waiting room, or in from the waiting room. Objective 5 is to manage bacteria from like E. coli that can make people really sick from livestock, sewage, and pet waste. This starts by doing a livestock assessment throughout the watershed. And then lastly, objective 6 is to increase the implementation of wetlands to act as natural filters of our water. So this was just a brief overview of those objectives, but then a couple of the strategies and actions that we're planning to use to achieve those. I would like to remind everyone as well that the WMA is not a regulatory body. So a lot of these will be recommended to be carried out by the member organizations as they see fit. So hopefully you put any questions you were having in the chat. You can continue to do that. We're going to move on by asking a poll question. So looking at these objectives, and they'll be on the poll as well, we want you to prioritize the number one thing you think will be the best for achieving this goal. So that can kind of help us know where to put our efforts. So I'm going to send out this first poll. So which objective should the plan prioritize for this goal? So objective number 1, engage with the agricultural community to reduce and maximize efficiency of fertilizer application. Engage with the agricultural community to encourage techniques that increase water absorption and reduce soil loss. Encourage practices that slow the flow of urban stormwater to increase water absorption and reduce soil erosion. And then continue to document and report water quality indicators. Encourage and increase bacteria management to reduce E. coli and other bacteria levels, and then encourage and increase the implementation of wetlands to filter water pollutants. So I'll wait for those votes to come in. I know some of you are on the phone, so I don't know how well that will work for you. Maybe we can have a little discussion after this main portion of the meeting. Wait just a minute longer. And hopefully that popped up for everyone that it could.
Yeah, we have 16 votes right now, 16 out of 23. So hopefully the rest of us can find our way to the poll.
Right. Thomas asked a question about be willing to pay more of what? So on the survey, the example was taxes or fees. So those would be levied by the individual member organizations like cities or counties. All right, well, we haven't had another in a little bit here, so I'm gonna go ahead and end that poll. So hopefully, let's see, I can share the results and kind of see what that looks like. And then I'm just gonna, oops. I was gonna download it, but it took me to a different page, so I'm just gonna take a picture of this. All right. So that is all I have for goal number 1, and we're going to be moving on to goal number 2, which is all about flooding.
Hi everyone, my name is Heather Flynn. I'm so happy you're all here with us today. I'm going to cover goal number 2, which is improve watershed flood management, improve flood mitigation. This second goal is basically to just take a look at the increasing intensity and frequency of flooding in the watershed and recognize that it's a major concern. During our survey, approximately 90% of survey respondents reported that they're concerned about flooding in the watershed, either very concerned or somewhat concerned. And over 70% of those people have also indicated that they'd experienced flooding in the past. The purpose of the plan states that watershed management is intended to offer a long-range perspective for both current and future flooding issues. Mitigating flooding through water management and the building and maintenance of healthy soil and ecosystems is key to the continued success of the Maquoketa River's watersheds, communities, farms, ecosystems, and economies. So we'll discuss the objectives as they relate to the goal of improving flooding management. So the first one we're going to look at is increasing infiltration. Increasing infiltration by implementing on-site practices that enhance soil health, reduce runoff, and increase the water holding capacity, especially for the excess flooding events. Objective 2, implement water quality improvement practices as they relate to flooding. This includes implementing practices that just minimize disturbance, maximize the presence of living roots, maximize soil coverage, maximize biodiversity. And it includes for both objective 1 and 2, promoting cover crops, no-till, strip till and reduced tillage, and regenerative agriculture, but also buffer strips, grass, native landscaping near and along the river. For the water quality improvement practices as they relate to flooding, we're really going to want to partner with the Iowa Flood Center and do a lot of management and stream monitoring with them, and encourage testing and analyzing test results by sub-watershed as well as watershed-wide. Objective 3, storing excess rainfall runoff. One of the recommendations is to consider using detention ponds, installing water and sediment control basins, but also the prioritization of restoring wetlands. Objective 4, restoring and protecting stream and river corridors and floodplains. This really is important to the other objectives as well as just the holding capacity of an extreme event to be held in that watershed more effectively. So there's a lot of overlap, and there's some overlap with our goal, our first goal that we discussed as well. But these 4 objectives we feel will really improve flood mitigation in the Maquoketa River watershed. So as we did with the first goal, we're going to ask that you take a look at these 4 objectives. You rank them, you take whichever one you feel should be prioritized the most, and just write that out in the poll. The first objective is increase infiltration, implement on-site practices that enhance soil health, reduce runoff, increase water holding capacity, implement water quality improvement practices, store excess rainfall runoff, and lastly, restore and protect stream and river corridors and floodplains. That was really fast. I think that's everyone. So here are the results. Increased infiltration was the most popular one at 67%. Thank you very much for your participation. We can move on to goal number 3.
All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Heki, and I'm going to be talking about goal number 3. So the third goal for this watershed management plan is to increase awareness and involvement in the watershed. The purpose of this goal is to not only educate the WMA about the needs of the watershed through communication with the public, but also to raise awareness among the public in mainly 3 fronts. First of all, to familiarize them with the watershed itself and the issues facing the watershed. Secondly, to tell them about the work that is currently being done in the watershed and what they can do to help maintain a healthy watershed for us. And lastly, to make the WMA and turn WMA into a source of guidance and information for the public by providing ample opportunities for them to connect with the public and for the public to connect with it. So one of the reasons that we chose this goal is because in our watershed survey that we did at the start of this year, many of the questions were answered in a way that we realized that there is a great need for rising awareness and for such activities. For example, when we asked who needs to be actively involved in the watershed to improve water quality, only 10% of the respondents thought that urban residents, city dwellers, had a role to play in that. And only 22% of the respondents thought that rural landowners needed to be involved. Those are pretty low numbers. And hopefully by the end of first year or first couple of years, our plan would be able to rise enough awareness among the public that we all would come to believe that it's all of us, everyone needs to be involved there. For example, 43% of the respondents said that they would like to employ best management practices, but they need more information. So that told us that we need to provide opportunities for the public to connect and get those information. So therefore we chose these goals, and we have strategies, and we're still working on action steps on what to do first and what to do second to achieve the objectives and then to in turn achieve the goals. Our objective number 1 is to educate the local residents to make individual efforts and connections with the watershed. While doing that, it will provide opportunities for public to learn about the watershed, the issues that are there, and how they can help. Secondly, our second objective is to ensure all stakeholders in the watershed are included. One of the things that came up multiple times during our focus groups with the residents were the fact that they basically expressed concern. They said that everyone is not actively taking part. And so we chose this objective to basically address that and to make sure that everyone is included, be it cities, be it rural areas, be it business, be it recreation bodies, all of them. Our objective number 3 is to expand WMA's network within the watershed through outreach. This objective sort of helps the WMA itself to establishes the WMA itself. And obviously through expanding the network of the WMA, it will create more opportunities for connecting with the public. Objective number 4 is to work to achieve an effective interagency cooperation with upriver adjacent WMAs, the state, the county, the local municipalities, as well as soil and water conservation authorities in the region. So once again, the goal of this objective is to basically connect the WMA with other WMAs so they could see what's working and how to adopt that for us in our watershed. And in that way, create like a smooth flow of useful information between the WMA and the relevant authorities and offices. So these are the objectives. Once again, we're gonna go for the poll, and we'd like you to choose which objective you think is the most helping the goal and most important to you. Hopefully we'll be having the poll on the screen. Yes, so please go ahead and give us your answers. This was fast. We got 18 out of 22, and I believe that's all of us that can vote here. So this is good. Do we have the polls? Can everyone see the results? Yeah, so as we can see, there's a tie, 28% for the first objective, 28 for the second, and 28% for the last. So thank you so much for sharing your input with us. We'll be using this to analyze, and hopefully you'll see this in the plan that we're going to put forward, and we encourage you to visit, and it's a living plan, so we will be getting your input and upgrading it and making it better and more suitable for the watershed. Yeah, so that's my part. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Asmita Paudel, one of the planning team members again. So I'm going to be expanding on the fourth goal of our plan, which is to preserve, protect, and improve ecologically sensitive habitats and ecosystems in the watershed. So ecologically sensitive areas in a watershed include aquatic and wildlife habitats. The most diverse ones are found in wetlands, which are areas that are fully saturated with water and they have unique vegetations growing on it. And floodplains also are one of the sensitive areas. They are areas besides water streams, immediately besides water streams, which is where water flows into in case of flooding. The unique mix of biodiversity that we get in these areas provide many opportunities for us to create recreational spots in the watershed. And recreation is something that has been mentioned as being one of the important activities that we have in the watershed in our focus groups and from our survey participants as well. So these areas additionally also provide natural water filtration and storage, which leads to improving water quality and minimizing the risk of flooding and drought events. Because it lets water store in it, the water that gets stored in the ground gets seeped into the streams very slowly over time. So it prevents drought and also prevents heavy flow of water, preventing flooding ultimately. So because of their sensitivity and vital role in maintaining a healthy watershed, we determined this to be one of our primary goals for the watershed. The objectives that we've identified that will help us get closer to this goal are 6 of them. So the first objective is to collaborate with various governmental and environmental agencies in Iowa to determine the levels of sensitivity, degradation, and urgency of restoring the natural resource sites in the watershed. We'll also base it on time and budget constraints, and then we will be prioritizing the most sensitive areas that require regular and or urgent attention. So the second objective is to improve habitat conditions for native lives in the watershed by expanding the coverage of native vegetation, improving stream habitats, and establishing wildlife corridors to minimize the obstruction of wildlife in their migratory behaviors. So the third objective is to restore wetlands and areas which are nearby water streams by restoring their original features and minimizing human activities as much as possible. The fourth objective is to protect source water sites in the watershed, the wells from which we get our drinking water supply. So we will be doing this by participating in voluntary programs like source water protection program that is offered by Iowa Department of Natural Resources, or by utilizing other state and federal support that exists for such programs. The fifth objective is to protect stream banks, shorelines, and buffer areas, especially to minimize soil erosion and improve water quality. The last objective for this goal is to restore floodplain connectivity by restoring vegetations, minimizing infrastructural barriers, and connecting floodplains back to streams in case of disconnection. So this will help in restoring the natural capacity of floodplains to store floodwater and minimize the impact of flooding. So these are all the objectives that we have identified for our fourth goal. If you have any comments, please feel free to mention it in the chat. We will address them. Meanwhile, we'll have the poll put up where we will ask you to again prioritize the objectives that we've just discussed, mentioned, sorry. So you should be able to see the poll.
And Asmita, it looks like we have one question in the chat. Could you define natural resource site in 4.1?
So the planning document doesn't necessarily have a definition for natural resource site, but I think it would be the naturally occurring sites which are which provide which serve as an asset to the watershed, like wetlands, floodplains, and riparian areas, or like all the source water sites and the surface water sites like lakes and ponds and our river. So those would be the natural resource site. It would also include, I believe, parks and natural reserves that are present in the watershed. So we are almost done with the poll. Thank you, Mike, for mentioning that. So our poll has ended, and looks like protecting a stream banks, shorelines, and buffer areas within the watershed has the most votes. Thank you very much for participating. Now we'll be moving on to our next goal, number 5.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jess. I forgot to mention that at the beginning, one of the planning team members. So this is our 5th and final goal, and that is to establish the Maquoketa River Watershed Management Authority as a trusted community resource. So since the Maquoketa River watershed is such a large area and has, you know, a large population within it, it's important that the WMA is seen as a trusted community resource, somewhere you could go, you know, when you need information specific to the watershed, or when you need to look at the plan that we'll be providing, things like that. So this is one of our goals because everyone within the watershed, all the residents, all of the visitors, the wildlife, the communities, they are all impacted by the watershed. They drink water, they use it in different ways. And on the other hand, the watershed is impacted by them. So going into objective 1, connect communities with resources specific to the watershed. So part of the task that we have as the planning team is to gather data. And in the plan, we'll be making that available for the public. And that is something that member communities can utilize when possibly filling out grants or considering best management practices that may fit for an area in their jurisdiction, if maybe they want to reduce flooding or improve water quality. The second objective is to recognize and identify vulnerable populations in the watershed that may be affected by poor water quality and flooding. So as I said before, everyone in the watershed is affected by the watershed. And in order to, sorry, I thought I froze. So recognize and identify vulnerable populations in the watershed that may be affected by poor water quality and flooding. The WMA can share this information. It'll, be in maps, and where vulnerable populations such as perhaps senior citizen homes or maybe low income areas, they can be identified and maybe at risk of flooding if they're built in a floodplain near a river or creek. The WMA can share that information with member communities if they don't already have that. And action plans can be made depending on the situation or the communities to help people maybe get out of a bad flooding situation or poor water quality situation. Objective 3, make the WMA representative of the people and interests in the watershed. The watershed has so many amazing features. There are great opportunities for recreation, for tourism, for drinking water, for agriculture. And it's important that all of those voices and interests are heard, because someone who hunts may have a different idea than someone who bikes. And by sharing all of those voices and having the WMA representative of the people and interests, we can build and establish the best management authority that the Maquoketa River watershed could have. So that one's a short one, so we will do the same with the polls as we did for the last ones. All right, so objective 1, connect communities with resources specific to the watershed. Number 2, recognize and identify vulnerable populations in the watershed. And number 3, make WMA representative of people and interests in the watershed. You guys are getting so quick at these polls. All right, and we have 18, I believe, 19. All right, I think that is 20. Awesome. All right, so it looks like make the WMA representative of the people and interest in the watershed, one with 50%. Thank you guys. And at this point, I will hand it over to Heather.
Thanks, planning team, for that really great introduction to our 5 goals and our objectives. We'll just kind of recap what those goals were again, and then we're going to move on to our final activity. So we prioritized objectives for the plan by the 5 goals. They were improving water quality through techniques for nutrient management, erosion reduction, and increased infiltration. Improving flood management in the watershed was number 2. Number 3, increase watershed awareness and involvement among stakeholders. Number 4, preserve, protect, and improve ecologically sensitive habitats and ecosystems in the watershed. And number 5, establishing the WMA as a trusted community resource. Now we're going to kind of step back and take a bigger look at where all of these objectives that we voted on fit in, and where you think the WMA as an organization should put its time and energy as it fits into the larger picture. So we're going to use a process called sticky dot voting. This is going to be fun. It's just going to be a screen with our objectives on it. You're going to have 5 chances to vote, and you can put all of your votes in one place. You can say, I really, want this thing to be prioritized, or you can split them up as as you think resources, time, and energy should be spent. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to look on your Zoom menu. There's going to be an Annotate button on the top screen under View Options. And we're going to practice. This is going to pop up. You're going to have a button that's 4 spaces over from the left-hand side called Stamp, and just choose a stamp. It can be, you know, a star, a heart, whatever you like, and just practice on this screen, if you wouldn't mind, clicking around. It's pretty fun. Yeah, so if everybody could select a stamp, that's what we're going to use right now. Just take a few seconds to reflect on the goals that we've covered and all the objectives. Think of your top priority concerns. You can vote for 5 separate items, or you can put all of your stamps in one area if you really, really want to. It's totally up to you, but remember, you only get 5 votes, no more, no less. Are there any questions on the annotate function before we move on and break up?
I'm just curious if there's anyone who is not on a computer tonight or something that they're able to do this activity with, such as calling in or something like that, and we can put you in an alternate group and just kind of chat. Dave, yes, you can do this on a mobile. I think you just have to tap the screen, and then there's something that looks like a little editor pencil. That should be, that's how I'm usually able to do it. It could be possible though, if you haven't updated, that won't work. So maybe people who can't get it figured out, or it's not working quite right, just can either unmute or let me know in the chat, and I'll know to put you in a different group.
Beautiful, everyone. Thank you.
This is artwork, Heather.
Yeah, so we're going to split up into groups, and we'll come back to adjourn, but we're going to split up to talk about all of the objectives in one place. And so just hang tight. Ellie will divide us up into different rooms, and we'll go from there.
It'll just take me a second to get people moved around.
Heather, if you change the slide, there is a fun slide that we can just paint on.
Okay, I'm about to open these rooms, and then room 4, just sit tight. I'll have to move into that room with you since I'm the host. So I'll be there in just a second to make sure that everybody gets into their room first. But I'll go ahead and open those rooms. All right, anyone needing some help in here? I guess Mike, you're not participating, so. George, do you need help getting in a room? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and join my room then. I muted myself. Oops. Hello, everyone. I'm Ellie again. Thanks for waiting there for a second. So I'm going to get my screen ready here and I'll share it. All right. So let me make this a bit bigger. All right, so I know it's kind of a lot to look at once, but just like Heather described, use the annotate feature, and I want you to, or you have 5, and I want you to put them next to the objectives that you think are the greatest priority for the watershed overall. So you can put them next to different ones, put them next to the same one, whatever you'd like. Right. Anybody still voting? Wait a couple more minutes. All right. So you can keep putting stuff on there, and I'll take a picture of this at the end. But I'll go ahead and just kind of start talking through these. So it looks like maybe we've got a lot of interest up here towards looking at increasing field infiltration and reducing soil erosion, as well as so doing that for kind of the agricultural community, but then also residents and urban stormwater as well. Got some more here in the water quality. Sorry, I've got to move my little Zoom windows around to be able to read here. Yeah, increasing infiltration to reduce flooding. Got a couple down here with educating local residents to make individual efforts, connect with Watershed, ensuring all stakeholders in the watershed are included in activities and programs. And we've got a few more down here. It looks like maybe that last one, make the WMA representative of the people and the interests within the watershed, had a couple votes as well. All right. Well, thank you so much. This is super helpful to kind of understand where the community's priorities are in making this plan. I am going to, let me know if you're not done right now, but I'm going to take a little screenshot of this little picture so that we can use this going forward. 1 second. All right, well, I think we'll return back to the main group. If I can get out of my screen here. right, stop sharing. There we go. Now. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and leave and then I'll call you back. But if you have the option to leave as well, you can do that too. Hi, Larry.
Hey, I got lost.
Oh. So are you trying to get back to the main room?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the bottom right, there's a little button that says leave room. So if you click on that, down at the bottom there in the blue, it should say leave breakout room. So that's what we're doing. Do you see that?
I do not.
Okay. Well, let me see if I can go back and bring in myself.
Okay.
Just trying to help somebody back from a breakout room.
Is it from room 5?
Yeah, it's Larry. I think I've got it though. So hopefully he gets back in here. There we go.
Sorry, I left you there, Larry.
Now we've been using Zoom, for all our classes since last spring, and I still struggle with it quite regularly. Internet doesn't always want to work with you.
The hard part is when you have to run something else the same time as Zoom and then just nothing decides to work.
Yeah. All right, so we'll just wait a couple minutes for everyone to get back in here. But feel free if you have any comments you want to share while we're waiting. It's definitely encouraged as well.
I'll share a quick comment because it actually hasn't been addressed yet, although all the stuff you had was good. I took a course from Joe Salentic about 6 or 7 years ago, and it follows pretty much the course that he taught. So it's good stuff. But my concern was the river trail. You had mentioned something about a recreational trail, potentially. And I've got land in a pretty out of the way area, but it's right on the river there. And my neighbor has a place where people come and they party and they leave beer cans. And he's got one canoe company actually illegally, or I don't know if it's illegally, but they're coming without his permission and actually starting some of their floats on the river from his property. And same thing, people bringing stuff, leaving debris. And I suppose there's probably some legal liability with that too that he worries about. But that's our only concern. Basically, I mean, all the conservation measures are good things. And I understand the nitrates and the dead zone and all that sort of stuff. So that makes sense. But we don't need a bunch of drunks with their floaties tied together going down the river, tossing beer cans. I mean, that may sound a little selfish, but that's the main impact, that issue that I worry about a little bit from that. In other words, popularizing a trail that wasn't there to start with. But you can understand that's a landowner perspective. But I mean, it's not a huge problem, but yet. So that was why I came, because of that talk of a recreational trail. And
yeah, no, that's a completely valid point, and I'm really glad you brought that up.
And we're on the North Fork, so that's not heavy duty. I mean, sometimes you, with a kayak or a tube, you'd get stuck when the water's low enough, so it's not a huge an issue as well, I guess there are parts of the North Fork out by 151, Highway 151 there. I guess it does get pretty big and people can float along there, but
Well, this is John Hallberg, and I have land east of Hopkinton, right on the river, and I share an absolute duplicate concern. And on top of it, we have livestock back from the river, probably 50 yards with the green belt between there and the river. But I see people parking their canoes and walking up and, oh, isn't that a cute calf? And then I have a 2,000-pound Angus bull that they piss off and then he hurts somebody. Who's going to pick up that liability? Or they leave the gate open and I've got 50 head of cows and calves stretched up and down the river. And then I have to go get them and find them, or a calf drowns or something of that. So who picks up that liability when you send people down the river? Not to mention the damage that they can do and a lack of respect for our property. We work very hard to maintain it. We work very hard to put shelter belts in there and to keep stuff from getting into the river. And yet some people can float down the river and completely ignore all the work we do and destroy stuff. So how are we supposed to deal with that? And then you talked about who's going to pay for this. Well, the people who are going to pay for this whole thing are the landowners with taxes. I don't see people in Maquoketa Manchester ponying up extra money for the watershed. I don't see, people anyplace else. The landowner's going to end up paying for this. And then what do we get? More traffic, more destruction, and we end up paying for it. And yet we get nothing in return. So help me understand where this value is. And nowhere in your early discussion did you mention the landowner as a key person in this issue. I didn't hear any mention of municipalities dumping into the river. I didn't hear any discussion about industries dumping into the river. It was all focused on agriculture. So I think you need to take your circle and you need to expand it and make sure you include everybody that potentially has something going into the river, not just agriculture, because we're not the sole culprit.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And those are all very, very important issues and valid concerns and really valuable information for us to include in our plan. We definitely want to also be focused on landowners and protecting them as well, and having emphasis on those urban areas and industrial areas as well.
When you focus that energy towards landowners, make it urban, suburban, and rural landowners. Don't just say agricultural landowners, because there's a lot of people in the rural areas that do contribute to the problems. Septic tanks, lawn fertilizer, burn sites, whatever. That's basically, when you do that, you probably specify rural landowners instead of just agricultural landowners. Put it that way, put urban, rural. And I'm not sure if you have a lot of suburban areas, but you do have some probably in the watershed. I'm not sure if you, I don't know where you classify that, but that's probably the way to focus that, not just agriculture, because then you're pointing fingers.
Completely.
Soil health can be done in the urban areas as well as the rural areas. Gardens, lawns, that's where you focus basically in the urban areas. Golf courses, I think you have 2 golf courses, at least 2 in that area. They need to be all involved in this. So just a good hint on that basically is, don't specify one so-called use of the land, just basically specify all uses.
yeah, and I don't know if the WMA has a newsletter or anything like that, electronic newsletter. If they do, it would be good to get us and all the people who have property right on the river, I guess, might build some goodwill. The river is not more than, I don't know, 30 to 50 feet wide where I am, but I've got a small bend, and I know it's going to be a problem down the road. I'd like to work on stemming the erosion before it gets too close to my road and becomes a real issue. But if you guys did, even just education through a newsletter, like I said, I think that would be helpful. Because I don't imagine you've got maybe the staff that an extension service does or something like that. But that would be helpful, because I worry about that. I think in 5 years it's going to be a problem, and you get erosion, you get too much junk in the river, that way. So
what has the group's interaction been with USDA and Soil Conservation Service? Because they do a phenomenal amount of work looking at, shelter belts and erosion zones and things around things feeding into the Maquoketa that go through farmland. What's your interaction been with USDA on that, as far as inviting them into this discussion?
So I think a lot more of that will come when actually implementing the practices. A lot of these are just recommendations for practices to be carried out after our time. But Heather,
well, we do have people that are part of the soil conservation districts, part of the WMA. So we have reached out to them. We're working with them. And this is all, again, in the early stages. So we're working our way through it and getting all the partners on board, whether it's the municipalities, the counties, soil conservation offices, RC&Ds. So we're working our way through that.
Thank you.
If I can make a comment here too, I think part of this getting this WMA plan is probably to develop a list of landowners within the watershed. County clerk's offices could help if you get some plat books basically and pull them out. FSA could help get some addresses and stuff for you. That would be for the federal part of the help here on developing this. It would be very beneficial if you could have that sent out to each individual at this time in the watershed. Basically, we're developing this plan. If you get any ideas, you could get a lot more ideas from people within the watershed. Surveys are great, but how many people did you get? Probably 10-12%. Maybe if you could get some names and just send a newsletter to everybody, some people might just respond to that to give you some more ideas. I mean, I'm just throwing the idea out. I know it's a lot of work to do that, but once it's developed, it's there, and the WMA has it in the future. So take it for what it's worth.
I can address the newsletters. We have an email list that people can sign up for, and I send out updates for that. We haven't had the funding or the resources to be able to do an actual newsletter or to actually mail them out. I think we'll see a lot of these things be able to happen now that we have our DNR grant going forward, and we'll be hiring a dedicated watershed coordinator. Those are certainly some of that outreach that will happen probably within the next, 6 to 12 months.
I agree.
If you want to be added to my email list, you certainly can do that, and you can reach me from the WMA website, and you can just drop me an email so that I can add you to the list that I send out information to. I'm only as good as the emails that I get.
I understand, Lori, and I think that coordinator is probably going to help you out a lot.
We're really looking forward to having them on board. So yes, for anybody who's on the call, if you know of anyone who's looking for a job as a watershed coordinator, we now are accepting applications now through May 21st. So you can visit, the full job description is on our website at www.maquoketariverwma.org. There it is on the screen.
Yes, I do have this slide up. This is the only slide we have the website up on. So if you do still have more comments, please feel free to let us know. I just wanted to make sure that the website was visible for anyone who wanted it.
You might consider sending information, all the contact stuff to the people on the meeting today. Got a list to start with.
Yeah, that's perfect. I have your emails from registering for the meeting, so.
Yeah, we will be sending a thank you letter or a thank you email, and we'll also be sure to include any links to the WMA's website for any newsletters or anything else you may want to sign up for to receive information.
I have a question for the group. I think thinking about Mike's comment about people just offering ideas, is there currently a way for, is there like an open-ended like opportunity for people just to type things, or is right now the survey the main method that somebody could offer up an idea?
So currently we have photo voice available, but that's more memory and experience sharing. But we have the survey, like you said, and the emails that are available on the WMA website, but having maybe an open comment box is something that we could talk about putting up on the website, maybe in relation to when the plan is posted. As Hecky said before, it's a living document, so changes will be made, things can be adjusted. This is just kind of the first go at the management plan. And it also allows the cities and the counties that are members to have sort of, a physical reasoning to do something like a policy change, or if they want to start a project, this does help them with that. So, but it is living and it is definitely open to changing. But yeah, we can add that. We can talk about adding that for sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other comments or questions? If not, if you're still thinking some stuff over, feel free to stay on. If if you don't have a comment or question, thank you so much for your time and your input today. It's really going to help us finish up this plan, and seeing the priorities you guys shared with us, super helpful. So thank you so much, everyone. We really, really appreciate it. Be sure to check out the WMA's website and look for an email from us sometime later this week. And feel free to stay on if you have more thoughts.